Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A God Shift. I'm your host, Shayna Rattler. I'm so glad that you're here today. But before we get started, like always, I have a favor to ask you. So, wherever it is that you're listening to this episode, I just want you to take a screenshot. And with that screenshot, I want you to post it on your social media, tag us here at A God Shift. And then I just want to hear your biggest aha moment or your biggest takeaway from this episode. And the reason why I do that is because I know that there's so many people out there that really want to do their part in order to uphold Christian values, but everybody doesn't know where to start. And so the more times these episodes are shared, the more people that can be equipped with the tips and the tools and the strategies and all the goodness that is shared on these episodes. So I appreciate you being willing to share. I am going to read my guest bio, and then we're going to get started for what I know is going to be a great conversation. My guest today is the founder of the Assumptions Institute and its chief executive officer. Prior to founding the Assumptions Institute, he served for 30 years on the staff of Cru, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, devoting most of his ministry to university professors. The Atlanta area resident founded the Christian faculty ministry in Atlanta at Georgia Tech in 1996. He holds a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies from the University of Portland and a master's degree in theological studies from the International School of Theology. He also holds a master's in theology degree in applied theology from the University of Oxford. His dissertation, Accepting Christian Faith in the Academy, was an important exploratory study of the religious attitudes and beliefs of university professors and how to reach them for Christ. He understands education and educators very well. His first book, Transparent: How to See Through the Powerful Assumptions That Control You, released from Clovercroft Publishing. And we're going to talk more about that, but I am happy to invite to the show David Richardson.
Hi, Shayna. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, it was a pleasure. David and I met at the time of this recording, it is April of 2024. And we met a few short months ago in February at the National Religious Broadcasters Association. And I'm very grateful to that organization because I get a lot of my guests that are on the podcast from that organization. And it makes my job really easy because I don't really have to vet most of them. I pretty much know that we believe the same and we're not going to be talking about any wonky woo woo new age stuff that
Exactly.
sometimes you get on these other platforms when people say they're in the religion and spirituality category. So it
You
was a
never
pleasure to meet
know.
you, David. So, you talk about, your book is about assumptions. And so you talk a lot about assumptions and you talk a lot about truth. And I think we live in a culture today where everybody's like, own your truth. I got to tell my truth. Everybody's so committed to their truth. But in
Yep.
order to lay the context for this conversation, I would really love for you to start by just defining what it is that you mean when you say truth.
That's a great question. Normally, I have to kind of back into that one. Uh, when people are talking about hashtag my truth or true for you, not for me, that kind of thing. It's interesting because they think that that statement is true. But how do you know something is true? Well, we've developed training courses that help equip people with this basic understanding, and it's an art that's been lost. I've found over the years, working not only with college students but also college professors, that very few people understand this. When I say something is true, it's because it matches something real. The way I describe it is true things match real things, and real things are true. So, like for instance, if I was to say, "Isn't that a beautiful green blouse that you're wearing today?" And you would say, "What? What? That's not a green blouse. It's a black blouse." Well,
Yeah.
of course, because what I said about the real actual blouse that you're wearing didn't match. So
Mm,
that's how I know what I said about it is false. That's how our
wow.
brains work. So true things match real things, and real things are true. Also, you have to understand that there are things that are the things that exist that aren't real.
Right.
So, like for instance, I'll talk to students and I'll say, I'll put up a picture of a big pink Pegasus unicorn, and I'll ask them, "Does this exist?" And they say, "Oh no, that doesn't exist." Yes, it does. It exists as an image. You're looking at it. It exists in the mind of the artist who drew it. It exists in the movies and the comic books, but Can you go out into the woods and catch one and go for a ride?
Right.
No. Why? Because it's not real. So if you don't understand what real is, you don't understand what true is, because
Wow.
true things match real things. And if you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not, you can't tell the difference between what's true and what's not.
Wow. And so I'm curious, I just want to play devil's advocate for a moment
Sure.
because obviously, and everyone's not looking at the video, so he's absolutely right. I'm wearing black and I'm not wearing green. And I think that that's a very concrete example that most people would not argue with. And
Sure.
so we're drawing a parallel between what is true and what is real, and we loop in what's happening so often in culture now, and people are like, my truth. So
Yeah.
let's just say I decide I'll be 47 years old in December. And so what if I decide on my 47th birthday that I no longer want to be a woman, I now want to be a man, and I go through the cosmetic changes to change everything about me to no longer be a woman but to be a man. And I'm like, oh, well, it's real. Look, I no longer have boobs. I now have a penis. It's real. So that must be true. So, how do you define truth in the context of,
Of gender?
well,
Yeah.
not just of gender, but things that their reality is not real reality, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, when a person says, well, it's my reality, the clinical definition of psychosis is a person who lives in reality apart from reality.
Yeah,
So when a person says they have their private reality, that's a borderline personality disorder. And in fact, that's what's going on with issues like gender. Because if you think about it for a minute, gender doesn't really exist in humans. It exists in linguistics.
mm,
That if it's fundamentally true about me that I'm a physical and a non-physical creation made to reflect who God is, if that's who I am physically, then gender must exist both physically and non-physically. Yet it doesn't. When you think about it, according to Wikipedia, there's over 100 genders. Where do those exist physically? They don't.
they don't. I
They
heard the number
don't.
was 56. It's gone up.
It's yeah, you go. They actually have a list, and so if it doesn't exist physically, where does it exist? It exists in my mind. Well, if
Yeah,
that's the only place that it exists is in my mind, is it real?
it
See,
doesn't make it real.
that doesn't make it real. Just because it exists in your mind doesn't make it real. And if you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not, you can't tell the difference between what's true and what's not, and then you'll get manipulated. So,
Absolutely.
so gender actually is not a real thing. It's a mental construct. It's a social construct, but it's nothing real. And yet we put public policy into place and medical recommendations over something that isn't real at all.
So we talked about gender. What do you feel are some of the hidden agendas in today's culture outside of that actually oppose this truth? Because there's a lot of them. And I want people to see that, because for many people listening to this podcast, they're going to go, yep, I'm a Christian. This is a Christian podcast. We probably all have the same form of measurement of what is real, which means we're all probably thinking about the same truth. But one of the reasons why I do this show is not just so we that believe a certain way can uphold our values, but in order for us to do that, we have to be able to talk to people who don't have a real sense of reality of what
Sure.
is real and what is true. And
Mhm.
so, what are some of those other hidden agendas in today's culture that we need to be aware of that could potentially be opposing the real truth?
Well, the biggest one is what I find in just the overall progressive movement, and it expresses itself in a variety of different issues. But when you think about it, when a person describes themselves as a progressive,
Mm,
what that implies is progress. But progress towards what?
right.
That's the thing that's never stated. That's the thing that's assumed. And yet when you get down to it, because there has to be a goal. If there isn't one, how do you know you're making progress? How do you know you're moving forward instead of going back?
What are you
Unless you know
progressing
where you're,
forward?
we don't want to go back, we want to go forward. Well, how do you know you're going forward unless you have a goal in mind? And ultimately, what that goal is in the progressive movement, especially in the West, is the creation of the ideal human and a society filled with ideal humans. as if humans can be perfected, that can become perfect. That while we see the flaws and faults in us, we think that we can fix them.
Mm.
But is that reality? In 7,000 years of human history, is there even one human who's ever perfected themselves?
No.
No,
Listen,
no.
there's a whole lot that think they have, but that's
Yep,
not real.
yep. And so what happens is if you think that humans are perfectible, then you must be perfected. You're creating an ideal person and an ideal society. See, that's what drives gender, for instance.
Yeah.
It's that picture of the ideal me in my mind, and I have to make my physical body conform to that ideal picture in my head.
Right.
That kind of idealistic thinking translates itself into all different forms in our culture, whether it's dealing with the environment, whether it's dealing with race, whether it's dealing with any of a number of things like wealth inequality or any of these other issues. It's
Hmm.
the notion of perfecting society, of perfecting humans, because what that assumes is that people are basically good.
Wow.
Because if people are basically good, then where's the evil? It's not in me because I'm good. So where
Right.
must the evil be? It has to be outside there somewhere. It
Yeah.
has to be in an object. Like in a cell phone. So we want to control or ban the cell phone, or it's an alcohol or tobacco, or it's in a gun, or whatever it happens to be. That the evil's in that object, in the SUV, whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be. So you want to control or ban that because it's exerting an evil influence on people. And if you can fix that evil influence, then people will naturally do the good. So it's not that the people themselves have any evil in them because they're basically good. Then the evil has to be in an object, in society, or in some system that is causing people to do bad stuff. But if you remove those things, then people will become perfect.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's what drives all this stuff is and think about this for a minute. This is when I discovered this, it blew my head. If people are basically good and can become perfect, and they're not perfected, if they aren't acting good, it's not because they can, it's because they won't.
Correct.
There's no grace for you. You can do it, you just won't do it. So you're deplorable. You're horrible. You're a terrible person because you're holding up everybody else by not conforming to the ideal.
Yeah. I love that you gave that example of like a person being good, but some of the things on the outside that they either have access to or that they're utilizing is kind of where the evil comes in. Because I did a podcast episode, a solo episode. I think it's aired, and I was talking about different ways to make sure that you don't find yourself deceived in this modern
Sure,
culture. And one of the things that I said in that episode is that one of the reasons why we're so easily able to be deceived is because many of the people or organizations that are deceiving us, it's because they've done some good. When we think about some of the things, we don't have time to unpack it. So, there are some organizations in the medical field and in the government field that have inherently been known to do some really good things over the years. But as
sure,
it pertains to, the COVID pandemic and the vaccine or whatever, they did some things that are inherently not good. And
sure,
it almost makes me think about rat poison because rat poison is 90% good corn and it's only 10% poison. But if you put it in your body, it'll kill you. And so I'm so glad that you drew that parallel because that's why it can be so easy for us to be pulled away from the truth, is because sometimes the very thing that is pulling us away from the truth is not all the way bad or evil. And so we're sometimes well, wait a minute, but this person or that place or whatever is, inherently has done some good things. So
sure.
maybe I should not even look at what is being presented to me with a closer lens.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what happens is if people think that they're basically good, that means they're a source of goodness, that the goodness comes from them.
Wow.
But if you read the scripture, that's not true at all. When Jesus was talking with the rich young ruler, he said to Jesus, "Good teacher, what must I do to be saved?"
Wow.
And he said, Why are you calling me good? Only God is good. Unless, of course, you want to call me God, which was the point of the conversation.
Right.
In Romans chapter 7, the Apostle Paul is wrestling with this thing of the very thing I want to do is the thing I don't do, and the very thing I don't want to do is the thing that I do. Who will deliver me from this body of death? But before he starts that argument or that conversation, he says, "No good dwells in me."
Wow.
He himself says that I am not a source of goodness. You know, if it's true that there's a creator and a creation that are not the same thing, that's the first truth taught in the entire Bible in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. So there's a difference between God and the creation. They're not the same thing. God is not the universe, and the universe is not God. Sorry.
Correct.
They are two distinctly different things. So that means that God is the source of the creation and everything in it, both physical and non-physical things all come from God. And the scripture tells us in Psalm 119:68, the Lord is good and does good. So who God is and what he does is the description and definition of good. He's the source of goodness. We see later in Genesis 1:14, when God made the sun and the moon to light the earth. It's interesting when you think about the sun and the moon, they both light the earth, but one is a source of light, the other is a reflector of light.
Wow, that's so
Uh,
good.
there is no light that comes from the moon. It's reflecting the sun. And when we get down a little further in verse 26, God said, "And let us make man in our image. And in the image of God, he created them both male and female." What is an image? It's a reflection. We're designed to reflect God's character.
That's right.
And God's character is completely good. He's the source of goodness. And when we reflect his character, we're doing good. And when we don't reflect his character, we're doing evil. That's the knowledge of good and evil.
And dare I say that I believe that the truth, to use your words, of Genesis 1:26 is the reason why the devil is so committed and is so busy in these days, because he's after that image and that authority that it speaks
Yes.
of. He is upset that he no longer has that image and he no longer has that authority. And I think that that's why he's so hell-bent on deceiving us and warping the truth, because he's actually after exactly what it is that you're describing.
Sure. So that's a lot of what happens in our culture today is this notion that we are a source of goodness.
Wow.
No, we're good when we reflect God's character, and we do evil when we don't. And it's not that we're a source of goodness any more than a mirror is a source of light. It just merely reflects it, just like the moon. But in our culture today, we think that we're the source of it all,
Yeah.
and we're not.
This is just fabulous information, David. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to unpack this conversation a little further. We'll be right back. God is commissioning women leaders to uphold Christian values and change the course of history for his glory, and to mobilize other women to blaze the same trail. Want to know what type of kingdom leader you are and learn specific strategies to impact change based on your type? Find out by going to kingdomtrailblazerquiz.com right now. All right. So we're talking a lot about assumptions. We're talking a lot about truth and non-truth and the source of good and evil. This is so good. I guess that's a lot of times to say the word good. But anyway, David, how do we discern? We're talking about how easy it can be to, be deceived, whether we're deceived about whether we're a source of goodness or, being deceived by some external factor. How can we begin to discern between truth and non-truth?
Well, that's why I created Assumptions Institute. I actually had wrestled with that issue for years with my ministry with college professors. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to do is help people understand truth from God in the Bible in real world situations. And along the way, I developed this particular technique that resulted in my book. And now we actually have training courses at our new website, learntodiscern.com. What we do is we use a tool that I developed called the critical assumptions test.
Okay.
Yeah, because when it comes down to determining what truth is, discerning what truth is, true things match real things. But the interesting thing is when you ask what is really real, that's a much stickier question because we're limited humans. We don't understand reality completely. We only experience a part of it. We can't get out of it to see what it is completely. And so consequently, we end up having to assume certain things to be real and true that we don't know. You just
Wow.
spend some time with a 5-year-old, why is that? Well, it's because of this. Well, why is that? Oh, well, it's because of that. Well, eventually you reach a place where you say, I don't know, it just is. And when you reach that place of, I don't know, it just is, you are assuming something that you don't know because if you knew it, you wouldn't have to assume it.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
and and that thing that you assume, you don't question because if you question it, it blows everything up. You can't understand anything. It's the thing that you can't prove. In fact, it's probably not even provable. And likewise, it's the thing that you accept to be true on faith. Because how else can you make an assumption? You don't
Mm.
know it, you trust it. And we all do it. That means every person you meet, regardless of whether they're a Christian, an atheist, a Buddhist, whoever, every person you meet is a person of faith, just a person of different faiths,
Of different
because
faith. Yeah.
what they understand reality to be like is an assumption you cannot avoid. You even if you tried not to do it, you couldn't do it. And so what I did is I categorized them and created a way to figure out what they are quickly. And actually, if you practice the skill that's in my book and in our training courses, there's a phone app that you can use to practice the skill, and it detects the underlying assumptions in the things that you read, like web posts and social media articles, or newspaper things, or TV shows, movies, other videos, or things that you listen to, like a lecture, a podcast, or just a conversation with a friend. How do you know what's true? You can
Yeah.
get at the underlying assumptions. And if the assumptions match reality, then you know that probably what you're being told is true. But if the assumptions don't match reality, I don't care how good it makes you feel, how wonderful it sounds, anything built on false assumptions has to be false, even if you don't understand the argument or the ideology. This enables me to teach middle schoolers how to figure things out for themselves. They don't
We
have to be told. They can figure it out themselves because it's simple. With this critical assumptions test that I've developed, you can walk through the steps in 20 to 30 seconds.
mm,
And even if you don't understand the sophisticated ideology, you can understand the simple assumptions. And well, that can't be true because that assumption isn't true.
right. So let's fast forward. We have been equipped and empowered with the tools that you're sharing here, the tools that your institute and your book gives us. What freedom can we expect to find when there is truth and when we've adopted kind of this way of being?
Well, first of all, you won't be manipulated by the things that are coming at you constantly
Yeah.
through the media, through the culture, those kinds of things. You can confidently figure things out for yourself, and you don't have to be an intellectual. You don't have to be the guy with multiple postgraduate degrees like me. The funny thing is I'm actually the son of a truck driver. I grew up in a single wide trailer house and just given a gift and an opportunity to use it, and I
Yeah.
simplified it for regular people. But also, like for instance, for parents who are Christians are concerned about their kids not only becoming Christ followers, but remaining Christ followers when they grow up, when they go off
Hmm.
to the university or the military or the workforce, wherever their young adult life takes them. They can be confident that they're not going to walk away from that faith because they know why it's true.
Wow.
Yeah, because this skill enables them to not only understand that, but also to apply truth from God in the Bible to real world things. I teach chemical engineers how to do this. I
That's
teach musicians how to do this. Anybody can use this skill to connect truth from God in the Bible in real world ways so that your faith is a real thing, not just something in your head or something that makes you feel good or helps you through a crisis, but it's something where your walk with God becomes an all day, everyday thing, which is an amazing thing.
it
Uh,
sure is. It's a necessary thing. I mean, if
sure.
not, we're right back to where it is that you're trying to keep us from getting to begin with.
Hmm.
So,
And
David, we go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
no, I was just going to say, and it's something that's not difficult. It makes your faith vibrant and real, and helps you to understand not just what's true, but why it's true.
Yes. Yes. So we could keep going and keep going, but I know you can't teach us everything that we need to know during a 25-minute podcast.
Sure.
So how can our listeners follow you on social media? What's your social media handle?
Well, we are Assumptions Institute on most of the social media platforms. On Truth and Getter, I'm also Discernment Dave, but Assumptions Institute primarily on social media. As well as Learn to Discern Online is on a number of our platforms as well. So we've got
Okay.
both Learn to Discern and Assumptions Institute.
And if someone wants to learn more about this and they want to take things further, what would you like to offer them? What action
Well,
should they take?
the first thing you want to do is go to learntodiscern.com/a God shift. Where your listeners can find our resources, our training courses. We have our essentials courses that teaches you the basics. That's for individuals. It's also for small groups where you can learn this together with your friends. But we've also got deep dive courses that are semester long for Christian schools. We have them for homeschools and co-ops as well, so that you can not just know a little bit about what's true. You can become a truth ninja. You can become a leader and understand how to help others learn to discern as well.
Awesome. Well, everyone share this. Goodness knows that we are in a time that the truth, we're definitely living out the scripture that says there'll be a time where good is called evil and evil is called good. So share this
Yes.
episode far and wide so that people can learn the truth, how to discern the truth, how to make sure that they're not deceived, make the right assumptions, and all the things that David has talked about today. So, David, I thank you so much for being here and sharing your nuggets. Everyone, I pray that this episode has blessed you like it's blessed me, and that you will go back and listen to previous and future episodes as well. Everyone, have a great day. Bye bye.